Identifying the suspect!
Coming to get you, Bobber.
Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at who killed who in Scream 4. As you should know by now guys, I have a couple of rules before we get into who killed who. One of the rules is, it's just my opinion. It doesn't mean it's the correct answer, and it doesn't mean that I think it's the correct answer either. It's just a fun game that I like to do. You can obviously join in as well. The second one, and most importantly, and I need to add to this as well because of comments I've had before, is remember the killer is a stuntman, so we're not going by the height of the stuntman slash killer in this film, because it would give it away if we find out the person's the exact height. Now, another thing that other people say to me in previous Who Killed Who's is, oh, that person's a killer because they're left-handed, or that person's a killer because they're right-handed, etc. Don't take that into consideration either, because this is something I do know for a fact, is the stuntman will have to use his left hand or right hand depending on where the cinematographer or the director or whoever it is want that person's hand to be. If the killer's left-handed but we need a shot that's coming through the left hand, that killer's not going to be able to use the left hand for the kill. They're going to have to use the right hand because the left hand would be blocking the shot. So they have to use a hand depending on where the angle of the camera is going to be for that specific kill and that specific angle. So don't take left-handed, right-handed into consideration either, because that's not a fact. But what is a fact is they have to use the hand they're told to use for that specific shot. The killer in this one is played by a stuntman called Dane Farwell, who's got a very interesting trivia page on IMDb. I don't know who made that page up, but check it out if you get the time. But he's a lot taller than the killers in this movie. You've got to remember, Jill and Charlie are very small people in real life, and they're small people in the movie as well. They're not supposed to be tall. So the killer is a lot taller, as in the stuntman killer is a lot taller than both of these. So please don't take the stuntman into consideration whatsoever. Victims 1 and 2 are Marnie and Jenny. Now, just like any other Scream movie, we're not introduced to the killers yet, or the people who are supposed to be the killers, so we can't guess straight away who the killer is because we don't know the characters yet. So from this point, we don't know who the killer is.
Okay, why is Jenny Randall calling me?
I cannot stand Jenny.
Hello?
Hello, Jill.
The first clue comes when Charlie, we can assume it's Charlie, calls Jill on one of the victims' cell phones and pretends to be them to start with when he phones them, and we find out that it's the Ghostface killer. They think it's just their friends having a prank, but because Jill is on the other end of the phone with us watching her as the audience are led to believe that Jill has nothing to do with it because she's getting the phone call. So we can automatically assume that Charlie is the one that's in possession of the victim's phone. Therefore, Charlie seems likely to be the one that killed the two girls at the start of the movie. You could also argue that Jill was the one that killed them and then gave the cell phone to Charlie so that Charlie could phone Jill later on to make Jill look innocent. I don't see the point in that, and I think for simplistic reasons for who I'm guessing who's who, we'll keep it on the simple level and the fact that Jill doesn't have the mobile phones, Charlie has the mobile phones, therefore Charlie's in possession of them and the bodies. Olivia then says in the same scene that she got a phone call from the other victim, Marnie.
I got a call, I thought, this morning from Marnie the Carney.
Last night as well, so therefore Charlie's probably got both cell phones. Later on, this has got no bearing on who killed who, but we find a bloody knife and a phone that was intentionally put into Sydney's rental. That scene was only really put there just to blind the audience as to who we think the killer is straight away. That might have given some things away, but it had no bearing on who I think the killer would have been. With all the evidence that I've looked at, I believe that Charlie was the killer for victim 1 and victim 2. Victim number 3 is Olivia. Now, the good thing for me when they were making Scream 4 is they tried so hard to make Jill look like one of the victims throughout the whole entire movie, and this is an easy one for me because Jill was obviously with us as the audience when Olivia was being killed by the Ghostface killer. Therefore, the only killer could be is Charlie, and as you can clearly see, Jill is with Kirby while Olivia is being killed. Therefore, 100% Charlie is the killer for Olivia. Victim number 4 is Rebecca. This is probably one of the most difficult ones because either of them could have been the killer for this one, but I'm going to try and look at it as logically as I can. First off, we've got Rebecca that's at the hospital car park or the hospital garage. where she was speaking to Sydney Prescott. Now, Sydney was at the hospital dealing with some wounds, and Jill is just after being attacked as well. Even though she had her wounds looked at the scene, she might have been at the hospital or thereabouts for herself and or for Sydney. So there's a good chance that Jill is already near the hospital. Later on, just before Rebecca's body gets thrown over the car park, we see Gail Weathers coming back from a meeting with Charlie and Robbie. Now we can assume that because she's just back from a meeting with Charlie and Robbie, it means that Charlie currently has an alibi with Robbie, unless they split up later on, but it's highly unlikely. So I believe that Charlie was still with Robbie at the time of the attack. We know that Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven like to be pretty sneaky when it comes to the lines that they give their characters, and there's a line that Jill says after the publicist was killed, and that is, "I'm sorry about your publicist."
I'm sorry about your publicist.
That just screams guilty. Since Jill could be in or around the hospital with nobody with her, and since Charlie has an alibi with Robbie, I'm going to guess that the killer for Rebecca is Jill. Victims 5 and 6 are deputies Hoss and Perkins. Now there's a lot of timestamps with this kill because there's a build up to where Jill and or Charlie could be at the moments the deputies are killed. You've got Charlie was at the barn with the stabathon for starters, and Jill was in her house. So at this point in time, Jill is the closest to the two deputies. Now we can assume that Charlie's still in the barn at the moment where Gail is putting up the cameras and somebody's putting down the cameras. So Charlie doesn't always have to be front and centre when they're watching the stab movies. When the stab movies are on, he could go around about the barn unnoticed, so he could be the one still at the barn while Jill is still in or around her house. Deputy Hoss then does a perimeter check and notices that Jill's bedroom window is opened, and he asked Perkins if he noticed that there was a window opened before, but Perkins doesn't answer him because Perkins is too busy trying to play a prank on Hoss. I believe that while Gail is being attacked by Charlie, I think Jill is the one that's out trying to kill or successfully killing Hoss and Perkins. Now before I confirm who I think the killer is for these two, I have to talk about this part as well. Near the end of the movie, Jill talks to Dewey about having matching wounds on the right shoulder as Gail. And then Gail mentions to Dewey, "Well, I never told anybody that." So obviously, how does Jill know that? So that could mean that Jill was the one that attacked Gail at the barn because she knew where the wound was, and Charlie was the one that was already at the house killing Hoss and Perkins. However, I'm going to put that down to Charlie just telling Jill where he stabbed Gail. He might have said something like, "Oh yeah, I stabbed her on the shoulder, but she survived." I'm going to assume that that's the case because I still think the evidence for Jill being the killer for Hoss and Perkins is a lot higher because Charlie was at the stabathon, so we can assume that he's the one that attacked Gail, and Jill snuck out her window where the police officers were. So my guess is that Jill was the killer for Hoss and Perkins. Victim number 7 is Kate Roberts, Jill's mum. Now my first guess could be that Jill is still the killer of her mother. There's no mention after or at the end of the movie that Jill confirmed that she killed her mother. I don't believe she did because I think that would be too much for Jill to do on her first killing spree. So I don't think Jill has the capability to do something like that just yet. Maybe later on, but I think Charlie may have been the one that killed Jill's mother. Now we have to remember that the stabathon got abandoned because Dewey came in and fired shots. Everybody fled the scene, including Charlie. So that gave Charlie enough time. From the time that Hoss and Perkins died, it gave Charlie enough time to get from Stabathon over to Jill's house. Now, there is key information that confirms who I believe is the killer up next. Now, the key information for me is when Dewey asked Judy, "Where's Hoss and Perkins?" and she said they were found 2 blocks away.
Where the hell were Hoss and Perkins?
They were found dead in their car 2 blocks away.
That tells me that Jill, after killing Hoss and Perkins, she had to put them into the car and take the car 2 blocks away to hide the bodies, or at least for a while. While she was doing that, Charlie comes back as the Ghostface killer and kills Jill's mother. So because of that key information that we got from Dewey and Judy, I believe that the killer for Kate is Charlie. Victim number 8 is Robbie. The build up for Robbie's killer looked like it was going to be difficult because we had Charlie watching Stab 7 with Kirby, and Trevor comes in, he's like, where's Jill? And they're like, I don't know where Jill is. So we could assume that Jill could be the killer, but then Charlie walks off in a huff because he didn't have time to sit with Kirby alone because Trevor came in. So now we've got Charlie and Jill missing. So at this point we don't know who the killer could be. We then see Robbie getting killed by the Ghostface at the front door, and a little bit later we see Jill coming down the stairs and she told Kirby not to open the door. Not those words, but she stopped her from opening the door because Jill knows that the killer's outside trying to kill or killing Robbie at this point. We then get a confirmation, and an easy confirmation, that the killer is Charlie because Sydney comes in, and then straight after her we see Robbie dying on the ground and the Ghostface killer coming, and we obviously see Jill is with Sydney and Kirby at the time, so we know that the killer for this one is definitely Charlie. Victim number 9 is Kirby. This is obviously a clear one because we know that Charlie is the one that killed Kirby, but it's quite interesting as well because we know that from this point on we know there's 2 killers because obviously the killer tied up Charlie, so we know there's 2 killers at this point. But yes, this is an easy one. Charlie is the killer. Victim number 10 is Trevor. Again, just like Kirby's death, this is a clear one because we can see that Jill obviously kills Trevor. So if my calculations are right, guys, it means that Charlie killed 6 people and Jill killed 4 people, therefore Charlie is the winner. So that's it for my Who Killed Who for Scream 4. Obviously this is just my opinion, like I said, so leave your comments down below. Let me know who you think killed who in Scream 4. Give me your reasons why, if they're any different from mine, because again there's some things that I might have missed, maybe there's some things that I caught that you missed as well, and we can discuss it down below. Now, I'm not going to be doing a Who Killed Who for Scream 5 straight away because I need to see it a couple of times before I get to decide who killed who, and I think I'm probably going to have to wait for the Blu-ray or the 4K or whatever so that I can definitely watch it, take clips from it and decide who killed who when that comes out. So don't expect the Who Killed Who for Scream 5 to come out straight away, but I will get to it eventually. Anyway guys, thanks a lot for watching again, thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.